Welcome to the third update for Project Breach. I'm very glad to be making these. One of the more enjoyable parts of game development for me has been writing blog posts. I've been doing that for years, since late 2013 to be precise. So the fact that I can do it again after a year or so of not doing it and making these videos alongside them is pretty awesome. You may have noticed this is a bit of a different format than the last update, and that's because previous devlogs like the Deep Space one, I didn't really enjoy making. I liked working on the game a lot more, and that's still true to this day. I really like making games. So this sort of style is meant to be more casual so that I can spend as little time editing videos as possible and more time actually making the game. You may not know this, but a lot of my videos take a bit of time to make. The aimbot video, for example, it took 5 days to make. And even the last devlog took about 4 hours to make, which isn't an insane amount of time, but I'd just rather not have that 4 hours of extra work to do every Friday or every Thursday, since I make the videos the day before. So this style is more so that I can just quickly record the video and then get back to working on the game. So starting on the game audio, audio was actually something I had intended to be in the last update, but I just didn't have time to get to it. I actually even created a joke video to spoil that it would be in this update, but I just forgot to post it. Thank you. Bang. But audio is now in the game for real. The first thing I did was add audio to weapons, and not only that, but ensure that each gun uses a completely unique sound so that they might be identified by sound alone. This includes both a sound for when the weapon is firing, but also one for when it's reloading. Next, I added sounds to pawns, which would be a sound for when they're idle, a sound for when they're idle and damaged, and a sound for when they take damage. And finally, I added sounds to UI buttons across the project, for the map editor, the biome editor, everything. Moving on to walls, the first and biggest thing I wanted to do in this update was actually to change how walls behave visually in their entirety. Specifically, taking inspiration from RimWorld and Prison Architect, the walls adjust based off of the walls that are around them. You can see here in the old system, it used to solely be a flat texture, but now, in the new system, you can see that walls adjust based off of the walls around them, including curve or form T's or whatever is necessary. As you can see, a massive visual improvement that makes walls feel like they have more depth. Because the game's visual style was entirely inspired by RimWorld, my first thought was to see if there were any public information on how RimWorld achieved that style. As luck would actually happen to have it, only about 15 minutes into looking, I stumbled on a forum post from 2018. All it had was a picture of a texture atlas from RimWorld, but it was exactly the image I needed to see in order to give me an idea. For those of you who don't know, a texture atlas is a method where you store multiple textures on a single image, and this is done in games like Minecraft in order to improve performance. The picture from the forum post perfectly displayed the 16 configurations a wall could have based off of what was around them. So, I wrote a system which would split the atlas into individual textures. Once I had done that, I created my own atlas and made each texture have a number representing its position in the atlas, starting at 0, because programmers start at 0. As you can see here. Now, I just needed to figure out how to write code that would know which of these textures the atlas should use, or the wall should use from the atlas based off of its surroundings. And that's when it hit me. I could represent it with a 4-digit binary. In the 4 directions around the wall, I could represent each direction as 1 or 0. 1 if there's a wall there, and 0 if there isn't, and this being an example. You'd see the top one, there was a wall there, so it's 1. The right one, there's a wall, it's 1. The bottom one, there was no wall, so it's 0. And the left one, there's a wall, so it's 1. If we look back at the texture atlas, you could actually see that a wall like this, a upside down T, should be represented by texture position 11. So the question then becomes, how do we get the code to equal 11? And the answer is, it's all about ordering. If we make the top neighbor to be the first digit, and then we go clockwise, that example would actually give us the binary number 1101, as you can see here. To make it short, the first number represents if there's a wall above us, the second number if there's a wall to the right of us, the third number if there's a wall below us, and the fourth number if there's a wall left of us. When I say us, I mean the wall. And, what do you know, 1101 just so happens to mean 11 in binary, reading left to right. And just like that, the game can almost immediately determine which of the wall configurations it should use based off of the walls around it. As you can see here, it can do this for any picture here. So let's just use an example off the top of my head. Let's say you wanted a wall, assuming there was one above and below your wall, a wall above and below your wall. So above would be 1, right would be 0, below would be 1, left would be 0. So the binary for that would be 1010. And if we look here and find 1010, we find that we have texture number 5, which looks exactly as it should if there was a wall above and below. So that system's perfect. Moving on to other project visuals, with this new wall system, I figured now was the perfect opportunity to make a more permanent texture for the existing walls in the game. So, as you can see here, I made a new texture for the concrete wall and a new texture for the wood wall. I also worked on block textures such as the grass, sand, dirt, stone, and I also redid the wood texture here so that it's a bit thicker than it used to be. And I also created a new texture atlas for pawns so that I could make so they change which way they're facing based off of the direction that they're actually moving. And you can see here, we have a new texture atlas with all 4 directions for the terrorist, and we have a new texture atlas for the SWAT guy. Future Blake here. I noticed in editing that some of the videos / GIFs in the blog post are a bit messed up in these recordings, so just keep that in mind. Now, moving on to gameplay. Walls, and all mod objects for that matter, can now be damaged by setting has health to true in the mod file. I've also made so that penetratable surfaces, the ones which bullets can pass through, can now also be damaged by those bullets even though they're passing through them. And with that in place, glass walls are now able to be shattered / destroyed when shot through, as you can see here in this example. The shatter effect they create is actually another mod object, a prop called glass shatter. This is because in a mod object file, you can now add the property onDestroy_spawn mod object, which allows you to configure the object to spawn another one when it's destroyed. Now you might be wondering why I didn't just make so you could spawn in like a texture. Glass shatter would work just as well texture as an entire new mod object. And the reason I did it this way was for specifically mod support. In the future, I could imagine like maybe a gasoline barrel explodes and it gets a bunch of like gas on the ground, or I could just imagine all sorts of situations, like for example, destroy a, let's assume not in Project Breach for a mod, but like let's say we destroy a mana crystal and then it just drops like mana shards. Like I could just see in any number of reasons as to why you would want an object to be able to drop other objects, and so I figured it was just better to do it that way. Moving on to pawns now, they have a small delay between when they acquire a new target and when they'll actually start firing, and this helped me accomplish 2 things. 1, frame-perfect firing no longer occurs, and that was when they fire the same frame they see an enemy, which felt a bit inorganic and fake. And 2, it actually helps to avoid stalemates. The delay actually has a small bit of randomness to it. It's not just see an enemy, fire 0.1 seconds later. It's between, I believe, I made it like between 0.2 and 0.3 seconds, something like that. And this is because originally, if 2 enemies at an equal distance with equal equipment started firing at each other, they'd always end up both dying simultaneously, which felt quite jarring and resulted in many fights where combatants were dead and felt like no progression had occurred. This still technically happens sometimes, but more frequently, one of the combatants will now have a slight edge, by usually around 0.1 seconds, depending, and that's enough to make sure that one usually survives. Although, as you can see from this GIF here, they still can't just end up killing each other, because that's also a realistic possibility. I mean, especially considering that in this example, they both have the exact same gear. And finally, for gameplay, if a pawn is told to move somewhere and there's a closed door blocking them, instead of having to order the pawn to open it, they will now automatically path to it and open it themselves. And you can see here in this GIF. And it was actually surprisingly easy to program. I thought I was going to have to do all sorts of complicated math, But all it's doing is taking the path that they're going to take from their pathfinding, and it's seeing if in the next node they're going to traverse a door. If it's closed, open it, and then just wait a moment for it to open. Moving on to the UI and map editor. You may have noticed in the GIFs that I've been showing that pawns are sporting some new bars. There's now a blue bar, which represents the weapon's cooldown, a purple bar, which represents time left reloading, and a yellow bar, which represents how much ammo the pawn has left. I've also changed in the map editor, there used to be a tab called World Lighting, and I've changed it to Environment. Because something I didn't have time to get to this update, but will likely get to in the next, are map effects such as fog, clouds, and rain. And I figured ambient lighting, which was what was under the World Lighting tab, would be a good fit under that category of environment. You can now adjust the max players that can play on your map, as well as what each team a player slot gets assigned to. Potentially, in the future, I'll make a checkbox that just says players can pick their own team so that maps can be designed that don't force what team they're on, but we'll see. And now, let's move on to the extras. Alright, lines of code written. We're now up to 18,573 lines and 212 scripts. And that's an increase of over 1,500 lines from the last update, an increase of over exactly 8 scripts since the last update. And in Demo Essentials, we have now checked off one more thing, which is most things have some sort of sound effect. And I've also put a little asterisk next to melee weapons in the Demo Essentials, and that's because I'm not 100% sure anymore that the game will support melee weapons. I think it will, which is why I haven't removed it from the list entirely, but I'm not so certain, which is why it now has an asterisk. And yeah, that's it for the blog update. I really enjoyed the stream that we all did, what was it, on the 22nd, I believe? It was some of the most fan interaction I've ever had. I've never had it before where I'm just talking back and forth between the chat and myself, and I really enjoyed that. So I'm looking forward to doing more streaming in the future after my vote recovers from this recording session. Yeah, no, thank you guys for watching. If you want to read some more of the technical notes and some of the other things I might not have mentioned, feel free to read the blog post in the description, and of course, join the Discord. And see you in the next one.